Commission. Aha. On that note, let me remind everybody that we are now recording this meeting and it is being live streamed on YouTube for the public. Today's board meeting is a hybrid meeting with Councillor Andrew Knack attending virtually and the rest of the board attending here at the commission offices. And so welcome to all. Thank you for those of us that joined us today in the EMTSC office, and welcome to the members of the public watching our live stream or later the recording of the meeting. As we start off every meeting, I would like to acknowledge the land upon which we are meeting. So on behalf of the board, we would like to acknowledge the traditional land on which we are gathered is Treaty 6 land. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and the Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of the largest concentration of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It is a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share the Edmonton metropolitan region as home. So with that, I got to tell you, just an aside, I had an opportunity to have a special occasion out in St. Albert where Fortis installed as part of their Truth and Reconciliation efforts, a memorial bench at our Peace and Reconciliation Gardens in the city of St. Albert. And I do have to tell you, it was a very touching event. And and I know similar activities are happening in all of our communities. And so that's a good thing. So to that point, that's why we read our acknowledgement, because it's the right thing to do. And because we are, in fact, on Treaty 6 property. So board members, we have a revised agenda before us. Any comments, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the motion as presented, the agenda? Thank you, Councillor Finstad.
I move the September 1st, 2022 agenda be approved as presented.
Thank you very much. I'll call for the question. All in favor? And everybody is unanimous in approving the agenda. Thank you very much. I do have to say that we do have on the agenda some public delegations, and it is my pleasure today to introduce Sharon Shuya of the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board. And following Sharon would be Chris McLeod of Edmonton Global. So Sharon, thank you for coming this morning or this afternoon to address our board. The floor is yours.
And good afternoon. I'm here to replace Karen Witchick, who had a conflict, and so she sends her regrets. For those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Sharon Shuya. I'm the Director of Regional Growth Planning with the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board. And this file for public transit is not new to me. I've been around with the board for the last 14 years and have had the opportunity to really understand the issues, opportunities, and the challenges in this area. So on behalf of the EMRB, we appreciate this opportunity to share a perspective around the value of your work and how important it is to enable the success of the board's mandate in planning for the future growth of this region. I think you all know the EMRB is planning for growth of another 1 million people and 470,000 jobs in the next 25 to 30 years. This level of growth within this short a time frame requires a change in our thinking about how we plan for where the new residents will live, where they will work, where they will recreate, and how will a population of 2 million people move around to meet the needs of for daily living. The emphasis in this growth plan is on responsible growth, meaning we will densify and infill before we build out in order to conserve valuable agricultural land and make effective use of existing infrastructure. Focusing on increasing density is also a strategy for creating demand for transit and other modes of transportation like rideshare and active transportation. The regional growth plan directs job growth as much as possible to local employment areas, as well as 18 regionally identified employment areas in the region. These growth directions mean that the suburban municipalities will densify similarly to what Edmonton has been doing for several years, but at a different scale. And job growth is expected to be more dispersed throughout the region, which will have implications for our future transportation planning. Further, the decisions we make around transportation choice today will have an impact on the environment and the attractiveness of this region for investment and talent. A guiding principle in the growth plan states to ensure the effective regional mobility, recognizing the link between efficient movement of people, goods, and services and regional prosperity. We will work towards a multimodal and integrated transportation system. This also includes encouraging a mode shift away from the automobile to alternate and active modes of transportation to ensure our long-term sustainability. One of the cornerstones of the growth plan is to ensure we are a livable region as part of creating the conditions to be globally economically competitive. Did you know that on a global scale, one of the measures of livability is actually the quality of a public transit system? That is why the work of the EMTSC is so critical to achieving the outcomes of the growth plan. The work of the EMRB through the growth plan, servicing plan, and more recently, the Integrated Regional Transportation Master Plan identifies your role as the coordinating body to address the long-term service needs for transit in the region. Investing in public transit systems is considered essential and table stakes for a globally competitive region. Entire countries and regions are focusing on ways to grow and adapt their public transit systems to better meet the needs of all residents and to attract tourists and visitors, while focusing on effective ways to reduce GHG emissions. Up until a few years ago, this region and province was a magnet for young professionals because of the quality of jobs and the lower cost of living. But that has changed and is changing. Over the past several years, there has been a quiet exodus of young professionals leaving the province for opportunities elsewhere like BC and Ontario. As a region, I believe we are clearly lagging behind when it comes to our public transit system when we compare ourselves to other countries, regions, and well-known Canadian cities. It will become increasingly difficult to attract and retain talent when it comes to young professionals and families who are visibly struggling with the cost of living and are concerned about the environment. These are some of the key findings from a recent global survey completed by Deloitte about the Generation X and Y and Z. Access to affordable housing options and transportation choice are contributing to the financial pressures of these 25 to 40-year-olds who have different value systems and are seeking more affordable options, including flexible work environments. Many of the Gen Y and Zs have no desire to own a vehicle, and in some cases, new Canadians simply can't afford a vehicle and have no choice but to rely on public transit to get around. The concern for all of us in the region is to ensure that our transit services can and are meeting the daily needs of all residents and visitors to the region. This is also a growing concern for businesses in the region and their ability to attract top talent and workers, especially if the place of work is outside of a major urban area like Edmonton. Our work at the board has shifted to implementation of the growth plan, and our most recent focus has been on the update of the Integrated Regional Transportation Master Plan, which took a broader look at the regional and societal needs and how well our plans are managing growth to meet those needs of all residents using an equity lens, focusing on getting people to jobs and connecting modes and supporting modal shift to ensure our transportation plans are inclusive of the population and not exclusive to any one municipality. The focus was to ensure our vision for transportation will enable a seamless, integrated, and interconnected region, providing a viable alternative to the automobile. What is needed is for us to deliver on this vision with the work of the EMTSC. An integrated regional transit system will enable connections to services and facilities throughout the region and create the opportunity to establish a coordinated approach to deliver mobility solutions like Lifeline transportation services that are missing in the region. If I can leave you with a couple of thoughts regarding the value and the mandate for this organization, it's this. Regional leadership is required to plan and implement an integrated regional transportation system, which I know you're well aware of, but it's needed to enable the economic prosperity and to raise the attractiveness and the global competitiveness of this region. Attaining an integrated regional transportation system is a key component in the region's overall strategy for managing future growth. It's an important tool in the toolkit to reduce congestion on the roads, reduce GHG emissions, improve mental health and quality of life, and remove barriers for access to jobs anywhere in the region and making more efficient use of our existing roads and infrastructure. I really believe public transit is more than just a way to move people around. It's a vehicle for opportunity, equity, and a better quality of life. Did you know that for every dollar invested in public transport could generate up to $5 in economic returns? Well, every $1 billion invested has the opportunity to create up to 50,000 jobs. That's reported in a C40 report around the importance of this investment. I think it's important to be reminded that the population of workers we are trying to attract and retain have a choice as to where they will live and work. And we are in a global competition for investment and talent. We need to ensure our future economic prosperity and sustainability for meeting and exceeding their needs and values of the next generation if we're going to attract and retain them to this region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shuya. Are you willing to take questions or?
Sure.
I realize it was just a delegation, but does anybody have any comments or questions of Ms. Shuya? Well, I want to thank you for your contributions today, and certainly could you grace us with a copy of your speaking notes, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was trying to
Oh,
wave.
Councillor Knack, sorry.
The YouTube video will be very good as I was like waving it like this a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Councillor Knack, go ahead.
No, it's no problem. I just first I just wanted to thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing. I just wanted to get a little bit more insight from you. You raised a point that I've heard a lot about, but I'm curious sort of how you've come to that same realization. So I know over the years, chatted with different companies, particularly some companies in Edmonton that relocated into our core, and would often share the reason they did that is because their staff were clearly asking for alternatives from driving. And you talked about that even broader in a regional context. And so that's something I've heard pretty loud and clear for quite some time, but I just wanted to get a sense from you of, how have you found that information? Is this based off external analysis? Because I do believe that is something that is coming up more and more, really, not just in Edmonton, but across the world. So just hoping to get a little more context on that.
A lot of the information that I shared with you today is because we're currently reading and we're trying to understand what's happening in the marketplace. And so a lot of what I've cited in terms of some of these trends are coming from global research studies that I think are very applicable to this region.
Great, thank you. The other question I had is, I think why this work that we're doing right now is so important is because I think when the IRTMP was first being talked about, or actually before you started that work, there had been suggestions or conversations around, should this region have a third ring road? And I think through the work of the IRTMP, it was really determined that, and I think you touch on it, it's touched on in some of the presentations, that all that's going to do is just continue to add congestion. Investing only in that form of transportation is just going to continue to make roads more congested. People aren't going to shift just because of congestion. They will only shift if there's good alternatives in place. So, this, in a way, does this help ensure that we're not going to go down the same path that so many other jurisdictions have taken of keep trying to build ring roads and maybe one day we'll get it right?
I'm not Not sure if you're aware, but the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board has been invited to participate in an Edmonton Region Network study that's being led by Alberta Transportation. And through that level of collaboration, we are going to be exploring the future transportation needs beyond the growth plan. And I know there's a lot of trepidation in amongst the region's municipalities about whether or not a third ring road is going to emerge, but we're hoping that through this collaboration, that we're going to find the most effective solutions long-term for the region and not necessarily start that process with an end in mind. So we're really hopeful that because we've been invited to sit around the table over the next 2 years to study this, that we're going to come up with the best solution for the region.
Great. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Ms. Shuya, for your time. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to now introduce to you Chris McLeod from Edmonton Global. Welcome to the EMTSC board meeting today.
Thank you very much for the introduction and the welcome.
Yeah.
And I'm here on behalf of Malcolm Bruce, our CEO, who right now is in Korea. And I had a number of things that I was planning to say, but actually the EMRB's presentation covered a lot of it. The issues are very much the same in terms of looking at the international investor lens to how the EMRB categorize things. I'll add just a touch on about talent. We worked with Calgary Economic Development and the Canada West Foundation this spring on a talent study to understand what was happening with talent across the province, what's happening now, trends into the future. And it is absolutely true that Alberta is losing younger people to other parts of the country, other parts of the world. It's not quite the case in Edmonton to the same degree that is in other parts of the province. Edmonton and this region in particular is doing quite a good job at keeping people. But that interconnectedness of the region certainly is one of the things that that came up as a desirable factor in terms of keeping people here. Is you can live in many different communities, whether you want a downtown life or more rural life. You can do that here and still have a great job and go to school. So just wanted to add that little bit of color to it. Most of the work that we're doing, and really almost all of the work that we're doing, is with that international lens. So we're talking to international investors on a daily basis. We're working with economic developers across the region on responding to requests for information that major companies are submitting in. And it is extremely rare that we're the only location, in Canada, or the only location in the world that they're looking at. So we're competing with other jurisdictions. And just as an example, there's a project we're working on right now where the major investor companies in Singapore and the two communities that we're in heaviest competition with are Dubai and Kuala Lumpur. Not Winnipeg, not Calgary, really other parts of the world. And I think the one thing to remember too is that when an international investor is here and looking at communities, they're looking at us with their own lens, their own frame. So if they come from a community where there is, regional transit and the majority of their workers are taking, trains, LRT, busing to get to work, to get home, to move around, they assume that's what happens is here as well. And so when they find that we don't have as integrated as a system, or it's, maybe might take their staff an hour and a half to get to work by bus, it actually creates an impediment that's a surprise to them. It's not the norm for most of the cities that they're looking at, which is, I think, a thing that we should be thinking about. And I can guarantee you that for many of the companies we're working with, an integrated transit system, and transit in particular, is one of the decision points. It's often a line that we have to respond to in a request for information, and at quite a granular level. Often it's, show us where the bus stops either are or will be, explain to us what the service levels are, can we run shift work from this? So they have a fair bit of a desire for knowledge, and it really matters. And it's not, of course, across every business, but we've got significant growth coming in supply chain and distribution centers in particular, where that's a very high need. Some of the manufacturing centers, that's a very high need. In areas where there is a real mix of employment levels with more entry level, again, very high need. And that's one of the key decision points that they're looking for. Again, very, very granular at times. And I can tell you as well that we've had major projects that one of the deciding factors on where they were located was access to transit. And if things change significantly, a deal can fall apart really at any point from decision until it's, completely vertical, until the buildings are open. And if a company feels like it can't get its staff to and from work, or if that's a barrier that they may lose staff, if getting to work is very hard, it really puts that investment decision into some jeopardy, even right up to the point that they open their doors. I'll say too that, hold on. Sorry, I riffed a little bit at the beginning off the EMRB, so I'm losing my spot. Part of the work too that we're doing is really trying to tell a unified and harmonized narrative of the region to international investors, so that they come in and look, and we make sense as a collective. The more fractured we are in things like transit, the harder it is to explain to investor. It's easy to say, this is how your staff would move, from home to work if it's integrated. If it's separate, and if communities have different plans, now we may have to come in with 5 or 10 or 14 different packages to explain how people might move from one community to another. And in a lot of the other cities that we're looking at, they are cities where they're moving just back and forth in one place. Here we're a region, and so much of our employment is outside of the downtown core, which again is very different from a place like a Dallas or a place like a New York. So moving from community to community is really critical, not just back and forth to a central hub, but to Nisku, to Atchison, to the industrial heartland. All these interconnected are really important in terms of moving people around, because that's where so much of our employment is. And also a lot of people are living in those areas. The other piece too is that, within that narrative, and again, it goes back to what the EMRB's notes were. Livability is a big piece of what we are selling as a region. People will invest in places that they want to visit, places they want to come back to, places they can imagine their staff living, and that ease of moving back and forth is really critical. It also helps with our environmental social governance narrative, that we can show people that we're being economically, environmentally, socially responsible. And again, that people can work and live anywhere in the region. The other piece I'll speak about just briefly before I wrap up is there are significant opportunities for our region in things like electric e-buses and hydrogen in particular. And if we had a regional approach, the case we can make about why to invest in hydrogen is so much stronger than if we have a whole bunch of smaller deals that they have to navigate through. It becomes much more complex, and the harder it is to make a decision, the more likely we are to lose it. So there's a lot of sense from there, and we actually have at least 2 very significant projects in the works in the hundreds of millions of dollars potential that having a regional system would really help us move forward on. And that's not even including other projects that we could be doing on artificial intelligence, smart cities, that a regional approach would significantly help. And again, the more attractive we are, the more we can show a regional voice, the more we're able to really take advantage of market share and make a difference.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. Again, very insightful. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to dig in a little bit more to the part you mentioned a bit earlier. You were suggesting that during some of the, when you're engaging certain companies, they get into a very granular level of detail around, where the routes, where's the bus stop. And I imagine, but I'd like to get an understanding from you, since you're doing this work every day. If they find that there's something that doesn't quite fit what they're looking for, would they go back to you and say, are there ways to make this change? Can this stop be adjusted? Can the start time of this route be adjusted? Do they go back to you and almost ask to see if that can be changed? So let's start with that question.
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So that leads to the other question, which is that I imagine from your line of business, having this single regional entity makes a lot more sense, because then you have one spot to go to say, hey, we've got this company that's looking to set up, they're looking to see about this change, and it's much easier to work just with one entity versus trying to work with 3 or 4 regional partners who each have their own administration, who each might take a while to get back to you. And when we're in this tight timeline of businesses deciding where they're getting, if you don't have that coordination, there's a chance you can miss out just because you don't get an answer.
Absolutely. It's absolutely fair. And I'd say that our goal often is to get from the short list, or from the long list to the short list. And sometimes transit is the piece that does that. And being able to respond within days to a request also is a strong signal that that we're taking them seriously. If it does take us weeks, that's almost a guarantee to get knocked off that short list.
That's helpful. Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knack, Councillor Harris, and Councillor Montcalf-Sween.
Question, thanks for the comments that you made today. What would you suggest Edmonton Global is doing to make sure that all of the councils, all the participants in our regional partnership here understand the importance of what we're trying to do and ultimately how that dovetails with what Edmonton Global is trying to do? Because I'm not sure if everybody's all on the same page. Do you think they are? And if not, how can we get everybody on the same page economically and operationally?
Yeah, that's probably a bigger question than I can answer simply here. But I think it is really critical. The more we can work together as a region on these, the handful of things are really critical to show that we are unified in approach and target the pieces that really matter to that investor audience. The easier life's going to be for all of us. And I think transit is one at the top on that list. A regional approach to waste would be another. There are several things that really make a difference. And again, globally, the most important thing right now in terms of the two things that are most important in terms of landed deals are access to talent and labor and how it fits into your supply chain. And right now the global supply chain is a bit of a mess. It's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much investment coming into our region right now, because of how we are connected to the rest of the world. It's easier for us to tell that story of global supply chain, how we can take advantage of our strategic location and access markets in Asia and the US and others, if we can actually move products and people from place to place in our region. If that link's broken, all the rest of it starts to fall apart too.
Yeah, I get all that, and I understand that because your messages should be fairly concise, and it's an outward facing message to people that are looking towards us for something that might end up benefiting them from a business perspective. But I'm wondering about the messaging to within our organizations, within the confines of this region, to make sure we all understand that same messaging going out.
I think we would be happy to collaborate with you and figure out how to do that, knowing that part of the purpose of Edmonton Global is to be laser focused on that international market.
Yeah.
So we'd be happy to help, but I think it would be a piece we'd be careful about leading so we're not
Yeah.
taking
Well,
away from that other work.
we've got a lot of moving parts here. We're trying to create something from the ground up, similar to what the region did when it created Edmonton Global. Obviously, the evolution of economic development outwardly facing has evolved in our region. And so what we're trying to do now is create a business model that ultimately does fit into that very nicely, I guess, as you've said, and it's part of the precursor to success. So, but I think we need to continually ensure that we're ramming the message home systematically to our region. So how we do that, if it's a partnership going forward and everybody can be on the same, we don't all have to agree with the same things, but we all have to move in the same direction, I would suggest. So thanks very much.
You're welcome. We're with you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Montcalf-Sween.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for coming in. Gord spoke to a lot of the points I was going to. I mean, you hear those messages, kind of on the periphery there. But as we're trying to build this up and looking to improve the brand and the reputation around and the value of what we're trying to do here, just trying to refine and get those messages into our communities, to your point, I think is crucial. I think everyone around the room heard that today, and there are comms folks here who are listening at that. And yeah, it's probably for us to lead to your point, but really, even if I could just record that and take a snapshot and throw it on the website, like I'd do it in a heartbeat. So like just hearing that in detail for my residents to hear that, what these big companies are looking for, to get out to our day-to-day residents would be really crucial. So thanks for sharing the message. And yeah, look for us to really take advantage of that and reinforce that within our community. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montcalf-Sween. I just got a comment. A number of years ago, there was a presentation by the predecessor to Edmonton Global around economic development in regions, and they brought in one of the members of the Source Locator Guild, and he talked about regions that were successful and how working together made a compelling argument for businesses to locate. It also made a compelling argument that regionally connected public transit was almost table stakes for social locators to even make it to the review grid, if you will. And so I appreciate that you're out there, pounding the table for what is, I believe, a globally competitive, world-beating region if we put our minds to it. And so thank you very much for your presentation today.
You're very welcome. Let's go get them.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. I believe that's all of our public delegations today. Yep, all right. Thank you very much. Going back to the revised agenda, then we have a consent agenda before us. And on the consent agenda is the August 18th regular board meeting. Could I get a member of the board to move that? Thank you, Councillor Gronberg.
Yes, I move that we, the consent agenda is approved as presented.
Thank you very much. I'll call a question. All in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, so then we are now on to item number 5 on the revised agenda, recommended opening day service plan. And I have a few opening comments, and then I'll turn it over to our CEO, Mr. Jankowski. Ladies and gentlemen, our board meeting today signifies an important milestone for the commission. The first public presentation of our draft opening day service plan. We saw it in camera last meeting, and I promised that it would be made public as soon as possible. And here we are today, a public presentation of our service plan. Today represents over a decade of commitment and collaboration among municipalities to work together to build and plan integrated transit system in the Edmonton metro region to empower residents to live without boundaries, promote a healthy environment, support business opportunity, like we've heard, and enhance the livability of all of our municipalities. The Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan identified a regional transportation system as a cornerstone for our growth and evolution. A number of years ago, the Be Ready or Be Left Behind report concluded that a globally competitive Edmonton metro region can only be achieved if municipalities act together to build the regional systems that we need. And the Edmonton City Plan shows that a vibrant and prosperous city needs integrated transit to be ready for an additional 1 million+ new residents. Our residents have told each of us that they want the ability to move throughout the Edmonton metro region without boundaries, and our service needs to support this freedom and ease of travel. Our ridership is a broad range of socially and economically diverse residents. Integrated transit serves to open access for all residents within the Edmonton metro region to support educational and work opportunities and access needed goods and services. We strive for a just and inclusive metro region, one that can support access for everyone to the opportunities to work, go to school, and freely move about. We hear repeatedly that we live in car cities. Well, that is not the reality for thousands of people who do not have the means to afford a car and are entirely reliant on public transit to provide access to work, educational opportunities, and health services. That is, if there is even such an option. If there's an option, an integrated Edmonton metropolitan region transit system will help provide that option. A vibrant Edmonton downtown core is also a critical need for the economic vitality of the entire Edmonton metro region. And regional transit will play an active role in connecting our communities to employment, business, and services in Edmonton, and for the citizens of Edmonton to access employment, services, and other activities in our 7 member municipalities outside the Edmonton Metro Core. Our board is pleased the opening day service plan is now being presented, and we look forward to the finalizing this plan over the next few weeks. Today, we will hear staff's presentation of the plan and also from our stakeholders. I look forward to our discussions. Thank you very much, folks. Over to you, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I too am very pleased to be able to bring forward today for the first public discussion, the presentation of the opening day service plan. Before we get into it, I do want to speak a little bit to the process that's been involved in getting to this point. And I want to actually acknowledge a number of contributions that have been made. This work has not been easy. Over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, we've had numerous discussions with all of our member municipalities. We've had discussions that weren't always easy discussions. There were discussions about potential changes in levels of service and changes in the way that services might be delivered. There were discussions about the cost impacts of some of the moves to integrating these services into one broad network that we're presenting here today, as well as discussions about the costs of oversight of that going into the future. But throughout those, even though some of those discussions were tough, we appreciated the input and the flexibility and the commitment that many of the municipal administrations around the municipalities represented by the 8 members of the board today that they showed. There were, as I said, some difficulties along the way, some bumps, but we got over them through consensus building, through discussion, through negotiation, and through expressing the common goal, what it is that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to build a regional system that meets many of the objectives that were cited by the presentations a little bit earlier from our external stakeholders. So I'm really happy with where we are today, and I do want to acknowledge not only the contributions of the administrations and of your councils in many of the municipalities, because we sat down and had discussions with them as well along the way, but also, I wanted to acknowledge some of the exemplary work that our project team has carried out. Our project team, Aaron Toop and Katie Souls from WSP and from Katie Souls and Company, they did the heavy lifting on many of the things that many of the plans that you're going to see presented today. Along with that, Andrew Anderson was our contract project manager, and this is actually Andrew's last week with us. So I really appreciate all the contributions made and the tough slogging along the way, Andrew. I know that it hasn't been always easy, but we are finally here at this point, ready to present the plan and ready to get to an opening day in early 2023, where we will be delivering that integrated service. Last but not least, I also wanted to acknowledge Jim McDonald's and Lori Shea Smith's contribution. They have been along the way. They have been involved in almost every single meeting with the municipalities. And today you see the end product that has revolved or has been the result of many of those discussions, as well as the discussions with you throughout the development of this. And I want to thank everybody for getting us here. With that, I will turn it over to Jim and to Aaron, I think, to start us off. And we're very happy to present this to you for your consideration today. We're prepared to take your input and then hopefully bring it back along the way with the required changes following the presentation as well to the city of Edmonton that is supposed to take place in the coming weeks. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim and Aaron, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Next slide, please. While this is not Stephen Hawking's scientific classic, this is the history of the EMTSC, which is, as our chair has said, almost 10 years old. As you can see from our brief history, Metro Edmonton's journey towards regional transit has shown an intense collaboration and coordination amongst the municipalities involved. As our CEO continues to state, I don't think there is another regional transit commission in Canada that has come together voluntarily as this one has done. And it shows a lot of effort that has gone on by those in the room and those outside of this room. The cities of Edmonton and St. Albert originally signed a memorandum of understanding in September 21st on 2017, proposing the establishment of a regional transit services commission. And from that point forward, written documentation was in place. Discussions happened with the municipal affairs branch of the government of Alberta. 13 original members signed on to another memorandum of agreement to form a transition team in 2018. And from there, 2 important documents were created: Accelerating Transit in Edmonton Metropolitan Region, Building a Regional Transit Services Commission. That document was released in January of 2020, and the follow-up addendum was released in June of that year to revise the portions of the business case to reflect 10 municipal members, vice 13. At the end of that same year, December 21st, 2020, 8 municipalities submitted an application to form a commission under the Municipal Government Act with the name Edmonton Metropolitan Transit Services Commission. This commission was incorporated on the 26th of January, 2026 under the Municipal Government Act of Alberta. The commission is comprised of 8 member municipalities who are represented with us this afternoon, and we value the board and its leadership in this endeavor to get us to this point. These 8 municipalities endorsed the transfer of responsibility for public transit services in order to deliver more seamless transit services to improve mobility across the region through integrated regional transit, to centralize the oversight for local transit service delivery for all members except Edmonton, to provide a more consistent and enhanced customer service experience to riders, to enable a more efficient use of transit assets and resources, to establish a unified approach to transit service delivery that can meet the evolving needs of this region now and into the future. When it gets right down to it, next slide, please. This is what it's all about. Better transit at reduced cost, connecting customers to business and workers to jobs, serving the needs of a diverse and representative population, and ensuring equality of access and opportunity and quality of life. The board decided that it would have another detailed transit services plan and bottom-up costing project for the regional network completed. The ridership demand and financial realities since 2020 have significantly changed. During almost 2 years of reduced ridership, as you can tell, some of the existing transit services have been restructured, in particular the bus redesign network in Edmonton, and has captured some of the originally identified efficiencies from our 2020 studies. There have been changes to councils during elections, and quite rightly, they have raised questions over what the costs of these different projects were. And that added impetus to us having the study done so that we could do a comparative analysis of what the costs were in the 2020 business analysis, what they are on the road today, and what we would propose as services for a region in the future. With that, the comparative analysis was completed by WSP Canada and public engagement was conducted by Souls Incorporated. And that was where we went through all of the various different conversations with our member municipalities about transit services and regional services. As has already been mentioned, here today are Aaron Toop and Katie Souls to provide a review of their project and their findings and recommendations. Aaron.
Thanks, Tim, for the introduction, and thanks, Paul. Before I jump into it, I also just want to thank the other 2 consultants that were part of our broader consulting team. So that's Left Turn, Right Turn. They were responsible for leading the transit service planning and doing a lot of the detailed analysis that we'll talk through today. And we benefited greatly from the advice of Kevin Desmond, who's at Sam Schwartz, as a transit advisor with a lot of experience in regional transit systems in Canada. So just want to mention their involvement in the project as well. So we've provided the board with monthly updates on this project.
Sorry, Aaron, can you just pull your microphone towards you a little bit?
You bet. Better?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The goal of today's presentation is to review the whole project with you again. So some of this will be a bit of a repeat, but we're focusing on the recommended opening day service plan. So Next slide, please. The opening day 2023 regional service concept is the product of a comparative analysis between the 2019 business case, the current state of transit service in the region post-pandemic. By comparing the visionary level of service set out in the business case and the current state of transit services, we were able to define a practical opening day level of service for 2023. The 2023 service is an enhanced but recognizable version of the existing 2022 transit service to ensure a seamless experience for customers through the transition of services. The 2023 opening day service is planned from a regional lens to amplify regional connectivity. And I really want to stress that point given the speakers that preceded this presentation. This slide is a reminder, of our intended goals and outcomes of the project, which we've achieved throughout the spring and summer of this year. The scope of the project included 5 key components. As our first task, we developed a project charter with input from each of the municipal member administrators. Within the project charter was also a municipal stakeholder engagement plan, which included a significant time commitment from the administrators in each municipality. The financial analysis included developing a framework for organizing financial information, amassing actual transit costs from each municipal member that currently runs transit service, and developing a bottom-up cost model, and supporting the EMTSC team with thinking and structure behind a cost allocation framework for regional services. In the detailed service planning task, we solidified our understanding of 2022 transit service in the region and produced a comparison of the business case 2022 and recommended 2023 transit services. The financial analysis was also a key input to the comparative analysis across those 3 scenarios in order to provide a cost of transit service in those 3 scenarios. The result of the comparative analysis is then a recommended 2023 opening day service plan, as I've said. Finally, and very importantly, we've engaged with the public and key transit stakeholder groups in the region, and Katie will speak to this in a few minutes. Before I jump into the remainder of the presentation about the opening day service planning, I want to reiterate that the financial analysis was a significant component of this project, which allowed us to complete that comparison of transit costs across the 3 different study scenarios. The financial analysis and bottom-up costing has already been handed to the EMTSC team and is the foundation for the Commission's 2023 budget. Now, before walking through the recommended opening day service plan, we'll review our project or our approach to planning service throughout this project. It had 4 key pillars as shown on the slide. The first is ongoing engagement with municipal member administrators. The second is establishing a clear understanding of the 2022 current regional transit services. And this was heavily supported by the municipal member administrators as well. Third was refining and applying the EMTSC opening day service planning principles to knit together existing services into a fully connected regional network. And fourth is engaging with the public to understand priorities for any new or additive services in the region. In the project charter, we mapped out a quite intensive member engagement schedule, and we ended up requesting even more meetings than we had planned. I want to thank all the municipal member administrators for their commitment and participation throughout this project. We really could not have done it without their commitment. We relied on their expertise as well as their flexibility to continue to make time for this project throughout the entire scope of work. So through the municipal member engagement process, we met regularly with both technical representatives and senior leaders in each organization, as well as finance teams when we were discussing the bottom-up costing and financial analysis components of the work. So it was a heavy administrative effort. Confirming the baseline of transit service in April 2022 was the foundation for the 2023 opening day service plan. The amount of regional transit service provided by each municipality today varies. And because this is the first public reveal of the opening day service plan, and we use the term service hours to quantify the plan, I just want to pause and explain service hours. Service hours represent the total amount of time that a bus would spend in service each week or each year. So for example, that means the time it spends moving customers, pausing at transit stops or stations and traveling to and from the garages to the start and end of service. So when we say service hours, it really is kind of the amount of work that a transit bus is doing. So with that, just a couple notes about the table in this slide. First is that the weekly service hours shown for St. Albert represent both the local and regional services, as St. Albert's system is currently too integrated to differentiate between the local and regional services. As well, Spruce Grove and Stony Plain is showed to be kind of a shared number of service hours, and that's because the two municipalities currently share transit service and costs. As you can see in the map, there's a network of services that are offered by each municipality. However, each is focused on the needs of the individual municipality, and there are opportunities to improve regional connectivity with some minor modifications to these services. The EMTSC opening day service planning principles are the guidance for making modification to the existing regional services. Next slide, please. Thanks. The principles are to ensure a seamless transition experience for customers by retaining the core elements of today's regional services, to provide a practical level of service aligned with both demand and community aspirations, connecting key high ridership attractions across the region with minimal transfers, providing express services where possible with quicker travel times, and to enhance levels of service in the midday, evenings, and weekends. Katie will highlight how this last principle has been informed by the public engagement results, but first I want to mention two additional principles that floated to the top through engagement with both our municipal members and the public. And these two principles were accessibility and safety, and they will be critical to the implementation of transit service in the region.
Thanks very much. And it's nice to see you again. And before we begin, just a shout out and thank you to this group who determined that engagement was an important feature and added it into the stream. And so we've got some really good information for you. Our public engagement scope had two components. You already had the study by Leger, the survey by Leger that had 1,200 respondents that supported the concept. This part that we did narrowed it down into two basic components. The first was a questionnaire that you could access with a QR code. QR codes since COVID have come back into popularity, so people were just scanning their phones and answering the survey, and it was targeted at current transit riders, and these riders included students, commuters, and people traveling within regional zones into Edmonton. The second was outreach to key stakeholders that, again, to the municipal stakeholders that gave us some really good names to consult with, and they represent the future and potential customers. So we got 781 responses. We really, in the analysis, looked at the GBA plus lens, which means diverse riders who hold a range of identifying factors, and they're diverse, living up to different lived experiences. So women represented 50% of that, for example. The LGBTQ population was 15%, which was higher than I suspected. Indigenous was 6%, visible minorities were 17%. And we got good representation from the surrounding, from the communities. Next slide, please. I think one of the most interesting comments that we heard was that people really agreed, and sort of the data is evident that they want more investment in regional transit that would result in more service. And they were seeing the benefits of this. That we know that transit is only partially funded through ticket sales and pass sales, and people were willing to pay more in taxes for that service. So that was an interesting finding. I don't think on the next slide it will be too surprising. I think it validated what our thinking was. More direct service to Edmonton, the express routes connecting key Edmonton destinations, and more frequent routes in the morning and the afternoon. We heard stories while we were handing out the leaflets with the QR code on them about how people, it's like Hotel California, you can get there, get out, but you can't get back, you know, one of those kinds of things. And so they really wanted those more frequent services and bus services on current routes on evening and weekends. So that was certainly the questionnaire side of it. Then under the good advice of this group, we identified some other areas that they could talk about, and that was maybe not for this plan, but to keep in mind for the future, looking at safety and security. And I think that's what Erin was meaning when she talked about another principle rising to the top. That was top of mind of most people. People want to be treated as customers. They want to feel cherished and valued as they're taking transit. So that rose to the top. And then, of course, reliability, cost, and convenience were also in that element. We'll go to the next slide, please. Then we moved to the focused conversations with different people within the communities. And this is another place where we looked through a GBA plus lens. Because we had talked to people who were currently riding transit, we wanted to know who wasn't and who would benefit from riding transit. So we really targeted newcomers, people living in poverty, people going to school, people who would use it to get to work if they only had the chance. And so we focused on those organizations who were relentless champions of equity, opportunity, and choice. And it was really interesting to listen to the delegation because they also talked about equity, opportunity, and choice. And they were looking at it from a global lens, from a provincial competitive lens, and now our work took it right down to the local lens. And one of the things that we discovered is that in all of the work that we've been doing, we've been talking about service plans and riderships and schedules. And ultimately, it comes down to being all about people. And how do we create a service plan that people can use to improve their lives, to enrich their families, and to enrich their communities? So one of the things that was really interesting to us is that every single group that we talked to had transit as a pillar in their strategic plans, which was a surprise to me. I assumed that some would have transportation, but it was a surprise that transit was a pillar in their plans. We were told to become generational thinkers, that transit was a game changer and that people's lives could change with regional transit. Regional transit, we were told, empowers people to make those choices that could not have even been in their frame of reference prior to this. We heard about employment opportunities, increasing education options, creating more connections between family and friends. And so really even though we're opening day service plan, we were told to think generationally. How will this plan improve the lives of parents and children and grandparents? And the seniors had quite a lot of advice for us on how to add that mix. The other thing that was interesting is that often women fleeing abusive relationships are trapped because they don't have means to travel to other areas, to leave a situation, to get out of that. And so they often stay because of lack of resources, lack of opportunity. And transit was linked directly to that. One of the things that transit could be known as a game changer on is that much like the delegation talked, it is the key to our competitive advantage as a region. And everyone we talked to identified that. And that was an eye opener for me. I thought that, we would just moving people to services and those kinds of things. But everyone we spoke to talked about it as an economic diversifier and really creating a synergy in the region. We also heard that it's the answer not only to economic diversification and opportunity and competitiveness, but it is a main factor. Regional transit is a main factor in ending poverty. That there are many people in Edmonton who are in low-paying jobs or underemployed and could work in other areas. The high-paying, low-skilled jobs aren't necessarily in Edmonton. They're out in the region. We heard from a business in Leduc who would have increased his operation, it was an agricultural operation, by 380 people if he could only get them out to work. We heard from Atchison, I think people were talking about that as well, the opportunities that are available in our regional municipalities. And that caused me to pause because I had assumed it would be people coming into Edmonton for services and for work and for shopping and those kinds of things. And in fact, the majority of our comments were about moving people, transporting people from Edmonton to those labor markets and really increasing the labor mobility chain through the region. We heard about nurses graduating either LPNs or RNs seeking employment in other communities, in seniors, in your seniors lodges, in your regional hospitals that couldn't take the jobs because they couldn't get there. And if you think of a nurse going to LPN, they're usually newcomers and they've surmounted the hurdle of getting their LPN and they get a job and they can't get there. So there was all sorts of compelling stories about those kinds of things. People really felt that regional transit was a common good, and that if we could invest in regional transit, it would save dollars and save hardship that's currently being applied to other funding models. And one of the examples that was used, and I'm sure it's a familiar one to you, that when they did the studies on ending homelessness, it costs $130,000 per person to keep someone homeless, and to access those systems, $35,000 annually to give them an apartment with wraparound service. And so people were drawing those kinds of connections. I don't know the numbers, Aaron, that's another job, another day, but they were making those connections, saying that if we invest in regional transit and improving regional transit, that we would get those same benefits. So that was an eye opener for me, the whole economic development connection. What we learned through talking to people in the different municipalities is that every municipality has different needs. And Aaron's going to talk later about how to incorporate the ongoing developing needs into the service plan. But transit fees, for example, are a barrier in some communities, not in others. We were talking with a community that had a large Indigenous youth population, and the youth could not necessarily get into the city for their ceremony, for guidance, those sorts of things, because it was the fees were an option. We asked one person who had in the municipality, and she was going to get a job in in Edmonton, and they said, well, just take the bus. Well, the bus, even that amount of money was beyond her capabilities. So really looking at the smaller communities and digging deep into what their needs are was really important. More routes, longer schedules, important to students, that they couldn't participate in extracurricular activities because the buses and so on weren't running in those nights. So it was one of those experiences that I wished every single one of you could have been there listening to these folks, because they were so impassioned And they spoke so eloquently about the need and the benefits and wanted to say, yeah, they said, you know, to tell you that, yes, we're all in. We love this idea. We want to make this happen. And so I wish you were all there. What's going to be next is the next slide, please, is we will do a what we heard report where these factors will all be laid out. The one thing that was really important was the continued engagement, that this wasn't a kind of one and done kind of thing. People wanted to continue to be involved, even to the point of forming a citizen input panel, a stakeholder input panel with members of your municipalities, joining with others across the region to offer insight and input on trends and those kinds of things. The other thing, because of the ongoing need for engagement, we'll be developing an ongoing engagement framework that the commission can use and will no longer need people like me to do it. They can work it on their own, and you've certainly got the talent in-house that you can do it once you have your custom-made framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Katie. I'm just going to check my mic. How's this? Okay. My voice is a little crackly in the first place, so I don't know how much to blame the mic. So what you've just heard is an overview of our approach and some of the in-depth public engagement findings from so far in our process. This slide now is the outline of the route by route summary of the new 2023 regional service plan. And again, I would like to thank the team at Left Turn, Right Turn who have led the detailed transit service planning on this project. So I'm going to move into a route by route walkthrough of the plan, starting with route Metro West 1. This route connects Stony Plain, Spruce Grove, Nate, and downtown Edmonton with 20-minute peak service and 120-minute service all day on weekdays. The Stony Plain to Spruce Grove connection will operate only in the morning and afternoon peaks, and the schedule of these trips will be compatible with the new shared on-demand service between Stony Plain and Spruce Grove. So the Stony Plain to Spruce Grove connection is a new part of this service. The alignment of the existing route has been adjusted in downtown Edmonton to connect at Government Center, which is a key hub for many of the Commission's new routes, allowing for more fluid connections across the regional transit services. Overall, this 2023 service recommendation represents about a 13% increase in service over the current state, and that's because of the new and enhanced connectivity both to Stony Plain and to other regional connections throughout downtown Edmonton. Next is Northwest 1. This route connects St. Albert Exchange, Naki, Kingsway, and Government Center on weekdays and weekends. Because it is a combination of two current routes, it can now be offered every 10 minutes in the peak periods under one route banner, and includes both a regular and express service in the peak periods. This 2023 service also connects to Government Center to facilitate transfers across the regional network. The minor modifications to the recommended service have not materially changed the number of hours required to operate this route. Northwest 2 connects St. Albert Exchange, Naki, Nate, and McEwen and Government Center on weekdays. This 2023 service is also a combination of two routes, which can now be offered at a 10-minute blended headway under the same route banner. The 2023 route includes both regular and express options in the peak periods, and compared to the current state, it's about a 13% increase in service, which was required to extend connectivity to McEwen University and Government Center, therefore allowing that connectivity to more destinations throughout the Edmonton region and responding to some of that feedback that we heard through public engagement. Northwest 3 connects St. Albert Exchange. Although it's not shown on the map, it does connect to St. Albert Exchange, Naki, Westmount, and the University of Alberta bus loop. Service will operate on weekdays and Saturdays with 20-minute peak service and 60-minute off-peak service, with additional 60-minute express service in the peak periods on weekdays. The 2023 service is a roughly 20% increase over the current state, which represents a slight increase in the morning span of service on one of the current routes, amounting to about 10 additional trips per week. As well, in the current state, not all routes connect to both St. Albert Exchange and NACI. So in the 2023 plan, we're ensuring that the route always connects to both St. Albert Exchange and NACI, ensuring that connectivity principle is satisfied again. The cross route will connect Clairview, NACI, and West Edmonton Mall with 50-minute all-day service from 5:30 a.m. to midnight on weekdays and roughly 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Saturdays. The significant addition of service on this route over the current state is to connect NACI Transit Center with Clairview along 137th Avenue and increasing the span of weekday service from 7 p.m. to midnight to allow people those evening travel options. There's also a slight increase in route frequency. It's 60 minutes today, and it's decreasing to 50 minutes to allow a little bit more service. And this route will also provide connectivity to Fort Saskatchewan via a connection with the Metro Northeast route. Metro North is entirely new. It connects Eau Claire Transit Center, Northgate, and Government Center via downtown Edmonton 7 days a week. This is a key north-south connection in the regional network, which facilitates transfers to the LRT in downtown and other regional transit routes, both at Northgate and at Government Center. This service is aligned with Edmonton's mass transit plans for future BRT corridor development. And this route includes more frequency in the peaks and midday compared to other routes in the regional network because it's building toward a longer-term goal of bus rapid transit service in the region. West 2 is also entirely new. It connects Lewis Farms with the University of Alberta and Government Center, also 7 days a week. The connection at Government Center is key to a seamless interline or seamless potential for a one-seat journey from Lewis Farms all the way to Eau Claire in North Edmonton. Like the Metro North, this service aligns with the City of Edmonton BRT plans, and the express service on this route is intended to be a precursor to bus rapid transit as well. Metro Northeast service connects Dow Centennial Center with Clairview, with service on weekdays and Saturdays to align with the cross service that I spoke about previously. This will allow Fort Saskatchewan riders the option for a one-seat journey to Northgate, NACI, or West Edmonton Mall. On weekdays, service will be 30 minutes in the peaks with a few limited trips in the early afternoons, which are additional to the current state. On Saturday, service will run every 60 minutes from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And this is also additional service. The 33% increase represents both that Saturday service and the afternoon select trips. Southeast connects Millwoods, Beaumont, and the airport in the peak periods with midday service between Beaumont and Millwoods. Service will run from 6 a.m. to roughly 7 p.m. with 30-minute peak service and 60-minute midday service. The 78% increase in service over the current state is due to the new connectivity to the airport, as well as the addition of midday service between Beaumont and Millwoods. The Metro South Airport route operates 7 days a week. It connects Century Park, Leduc, and the airport on weekdays, and it connects Century Park to the airport on weekends. The service follows the main commuting or travel pattern for each time period with 30-minute peak service and 60-minute all-day service. For example, on weekday mornings, Leduc residents would travel directly to Century Park in the northbound direction, and on the return direction southbound, the bus would connect from Century Park to the airport and then extend to Leduc after the airport. The route is an example of an efficiency that's been realized through the combination of two routes and is approximately a 20% reduction in service over below the current state, I should say, while maintaining the effect of very similar service for customers as it is today. Metro Southwest is entirely new as well. It connects Devon with Lewis Farms with a modest addition of 2 trips in each morning and afternoon peaks on weekdays. This route would operate only from September to April to align with the higher demand months of the year and is an early step into transit service for Devon. The connection at Lewis Farms would allow for a seamless journey between Devon and West Edmonton Mall, University of Alberta, and Government Center. So after that review of the 2023 service, we want to end on the note of the evolution of the service. The opening day service is developed based on a recognition of what exists today and the principles for developing the opening day service, as well as municipal engagement and public and stakeholder engagement. Ideally, transit service guidelines would also inform the service plan, but the transit service guidelines that were developed during the business case process are out of date, kind of as is some of the statistics, as are some of the statistics in the business case. So a next key step in service planning for the commission will be the development of service guidelines to inform future service iterations and service planning. Municipal member administrators and members of the public will continue to play an important role in development of the service guidelines and as stakeholders in the future EMTSC planning cycle. The recommended service evolution shown on the slide involves an ongoing feedback and improvement cycle centered around service guidelines. Engagement, as Katie mentioned, is embedded in this, and an engagement framework for the commission is going forward, which will consider both the stakeholders and the public. So unless Katie has anything to add, I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I add one more thing?
Of course you may.
Thank you. I forgot to tell you that the trend in ending poverty and supporting people has shifted from programming to more action. And people felt they can't program their way out of poverty. And the line that I wanted to share with you is people said, I'd rather hire more bus drivers than social workers. We will have better luck ending poverty with bus drivers. And I just wanted to leave you with that. Thank you for indulging me.
Well, it's our pleasure, and thank you both for the presentation. Mr. Jankowski, how would you like to proceed now to questions? Mr. McDonald.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I would just like to make to bring forward one point when we go back to the southeast route, the airport route, in particular with the explanation about the service to both Leduc and the airport. One of the things that wasn't mentioned that I do want to highlight is that the airport service from the airport to Century Park is virtually unchanged from what is currently on the road today, with the exception that for 4 trips in the morning before airplanes land, the routing will be going from the airport to Leduc to allow Leduc residents to go straight from Leduc to Century Park for approximately 4 of the early morning trips. That supports their peak hour service. In the afternoon, there will be 2 different buses leaving Century Park. One will be the Century Park Airport, one will be the South Airport, and one will be the South route. The South Airport is a direct route from Century Park to the airport that supports any of the commuter traffic that are going to work or take an airplane out of the EIA. The other service will be direct from the airport or from Century Park to Leduc to support the reverse commuter traffic that are coming out of Edmonton and going to Leduc that afternoon. So just wanted to make sure that was brought forward because it is confusing, sometimes even in our minds. So I wanted to make sure that that one was brought forward because it was inadvertently missed in the explanation earlier.
Fair enough. Thank you.
With that, we have time for questions if there are any questions from the board.
All right. Well, I appreciate that explanation there because it's we're here to serve, and sometimes it requires finesse in order to do that well. So I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Harris, Councillor Gronberg, Councillor Monkoff Swain, Councillor Finstad. All right. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, looking at the table on page 47 of the report, the regional service direct operating costs, the 2023 annual service cost, you got like for, and I think it might just be an error. You've got Metro Northwest, which should probably be Metro Northeast, 5,391 service hours at a cost of 623,700. So I think you just need to change the designator on that particular route to northeast from northwest. But in this table, you use 5391, which is a fairly precise number. But in the actual route assignments, the number was 5,500. Do you round up in some places and go to actual numbers in others, or what's the clarification on that so I understand?
Yes, Counselor, if the original map that you're referring to was one of the earlier drafts, we corrected the title in the presentation copy as well as the actual number.
So what I have has been corrected?
Yes.
Okay, well, I never got another copy, so this is the only one I'm working with. So, okay, so you've picked that up. So then what's the number? You're using 5,500 in our case, and I'm just zeroing in on that one for my reference point, as opposed to 5391. Has that been corrected, or what is the number? Because somebody's going to say, well, you got it here in one report, and you got it here in another part of the report. Yeah, so there you've got 5,500. And does that include the Saturday service?
The 5,500 does include the Saturday service. I'll have to take that back and coordinate with Lori on the financial calculations that you're looking at as well, and just we can get you in.
Yeah, so
Connect.
on the table on 47, are those the accurate numbers, or? Because somebody is gonna they're gonna point to inconsistencies in number presentation.
I'm seeing nods that the table 47 is, yes, is the accurate number. What is in the table in this presentation is a rounded number for presentation purposes.
Yeah, okay, well, then that's just a base note in relation to rounding, so that people know, because I didn't see it anywhere in the report. And I don't like to stand on that level of detail, but if anybody's gonna pick anything, they're gonna find an error, or they're gonna find something that's not correct or seems to be odd, and that's what they'll zero in on. And I'm not trying to zero in on it. So thanks for the clarification on that clarification. And I was zeroing in on the one because it impacts my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris, Councillor Gronberg, then Councillor Monkhoff Swain and Councillor Finstead. Go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for that presentation, all three of you. And thank you for the feedback. I always love hearing the feedback. Ms. Chup, just wondering. Oh, thank you. Could you clarify for the service to Devon, why the route was chosen to go up north versus going through, say, Nisku and connecting with local service in Leduc?
Great question, and something we discussed throughout the development of the route. A lot of this alignment comes down to opportunity and potential connectivity with both Enoch pending future discussions, as well as potential to Parkland County and possible cost sharing opportunities for Devon in the future. So this one had also some travel time benefits and kind of direct connectivity to the University of Alberta, which we thought would align well with the months of service from September to April.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
I can add further on that. When you take a look at what is available at the Edmonton International Airport for future travel, so if a person's going from Devon if they were to take the route to the airport, at the airport, there's only access to one or two additional routes of transit. Whereas if they were taking the bus from Devon up to the West Edmonton Mall, for example, there's at least 10 different kinds of bus routes that could take those folks all around the various different parts of Edmonton. So as Ms. Toop says, it's about opportunity for those riders, and moving from Devon up to the West Edmonton Mall side actually provides more opportunities for Devon residents to get to different places than just going to the airport would at this point.
Thank you.
Councillor Monkhoff Swain.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First, maybe just a big thank you. I know we, Beaumont, meaning me, have been a little bit challenging through this process, but very, very happy with where we've landed here. So thanks for taking all the feedback throughout, coming out and speaking with our council and administration and walking through that. So yeah, yeah, thanks for the patience along the way. I think we've landed in an excellent spot. So we're really excited to see this come into fruition. The question I have to ask in public here is, we're mentioning 2023. That's a wide target. I just wondered if you could just share what the public message is around what our thinking is within 2023. Have any more thoughts around that, or what could we share with our members and our citizens in terms of when within 2023?
So at this point, we're saying spring/summer of 2023.
Thank you.
Councillor Finstead. And Councillor Loring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the question I have is one that's somewhat obvious. Is it appears that there is a lower level of service for Leduc with an increase in cost, and that's going to be something that needs to be overcome. So how do we justify, rationalize that apparent issue?
I'll speak to my scope on the service plan, and then I'll let Jim jump in with any further comments. But rather than a decrease in service, what we think we've realized is an efficiency in service by combining the Leduc Route 1 and the 747. So the effective solution is quite seamless and the same for customers, except for the notes that Jim mentioned previously, but allows for some efficiency because both of those routes were currently doing similar things to Century Park, and we've been able to merge them together to a 20% cost or service hour savings. And I'll let Jim or someone else from the EMTSC side speak about cost.
Thank you. Maybe I'll jump in here. What we wanted to do was to pause on the discussions around the routes and to answer any questions that there might be on the routes. We do have the remainder of the presentation that was going to get into the financial aspects, and we were going to touch on the costs that are being presented, particularly on table 47 or page 47 with regards to the various regional route elements, and also speak to the process that we're going to walk the board through over the coming 2 months with respect to preparing the budget, the draft budget for your consideration in October. There are a number of elements that will have to be worked into the budgetary numbers, as well as the ultimate requisitions to the municipalities. And Ms. Shea Smith is ready to walk through that as well. Hearing the flavor of the questions that are coming forward and the fact that there appear to be a lot of questions or interest on the financial side, it may be more appropriate for us if there aren't any sort of service related questions with regards to the map. It may be more appropriate for us to walk through the rest of the presentation and then address some of the questions that perhaps are coming up and might be answered through the next few slides. So I'll leave it up to the board to consider which way you'd like us to go.
Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Go ahead, Councillor Finstead.
Yeah, just a further comment. We're going to be asked to vote on this on September 15th. And my concern is I do not have sufficient time between now and then to inform my council colleagues and have the, I guess, authorization to make such a decision based on the apparent difference that we just chatted about. So I'm just wondering how we're going to be able to overcome that. And secondly, I know that our CAO has suggested or requested that all of the CAOs of the member municipalities get together with EMTSC staff to discuss this, as opposed to just relying on one-on-one meetings. That they feel it'd be far more beneficial to have a larger audience or a larger group, if you will. So I would like that taken into consideration and going forward.
Okay. So noted. Counselor Knack, before we go to the next part of the presentation, you okay?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, Counselor Laurie.
Very much, Mr. Chair. Two questions in regards to the routing and the mapping we've seen. And the first, I think, is more just for clarity, as I know it has been discussed before on the Metro West 1 servicing Stony Plain and Spruce Grove. Obviously, as we look at the map for Metro West 1, we see a significant amount of routing within the city of Spruce Grove. Versus the service to Stony Plain is a one-stop at a parking ride. You also mentioned the transition of service from the current Stony Plain route that connects into that regional network, moving to join with Spruce Grove and their on-demand. So I just want clarity. The intention is still remaining that when the West Winds Transit Service Center is constructed in 2024 in the city of Spruce Grove, that Spruce Grove will then turn into a one-stop, same as Stony Plain will be, and that will then create the express route that was originally contemplated in the original service plan.
Yes, well, I'm hesitant to commit to the exact details. I think we've acknowledged that as soon as that park and ride is available and open, that's a huge opportunity to streamline service.
Okay,
through Spruce
and
Grove.
so would it be reasonable then to also come to the assertion that that would result in a reduction in weekly service hours and ultimately a reduction in expense? Or would those service hours then be transitioned into creating a higher frequency service in order to service the routes?
Without prejudicing at this time, we would have to make a determination as to what those numbers look like when we're presented with that option, and provide a recommendation at the time. My personal view would be, I'd love to just throw those savings back into extra frequency, but I think we would come back for board direction, or we would be going through our service standards, which hopefully will be in a better state by then.
Excellent, thank you. And so then if I may, my second question is in regards to the Metro Southwest route. We noticed that there is the bullet point of discussions regarding connection to Enoch Cree Nation are planned. Ever since the original business case and the stand-up of the then RTSC, now EMTSC commission, engagement with the First Nations partners has been a huge ask. It has been something that we have explicitly desired to have involved. I guess this question is maybe as simple as this route goes right through Enoch. Is there a possibility for the EMTSC board to simply decide to add a stop as long as there is approval from the nation, with continued conversations happening about what their potential role is in the commission as a member, whether that be paid, unpaid, any of those type of conversations?
Mr. Chair, absolutely. That's something we can take a look at. I apologize for the crackling. We have reached out more than once to the Enoch First Nation. They've indicated that they do have an interest in sitting down and speaking to us. They, to this point, have not been able to give us a time to do so, but we're certainly looking forward to doing exactly that, to talk about the opportunities. We can certainly look into the ramifications of creating an additional stop if it will be tied into the discussion around Parkland County service as well. So we can take a look at whether the kind of a unilateral decision can be made. I would suggest that it probably behooves us to have a discussion with the First Nation first, and so we're certainly pushing in that direction.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor Mokoff-Swain.
Maybe just to add to that. So first, thanks for bringing it up, Justin. That's great. What I would ask is, and I think this board has stressed this quite a few times, just use the relationships that we have at the board. There are plenty of folks here who engage with Enoch from a municipality or professionally and have those relationships. I know it can be pretty tough sometimes to cold call a nation like that. So use the relationships. If you're looking to get that meeting, we've been asking for that update to Justin's point. Use folks here who can help facilitate that question. And then I'll just put in a shameless plug. They do have their treaty days this weekend. They've got a very exciting relay race going off on the 3rd and 4th. So could be an opportunity to get out there and check out the powwow and that exciting event, but also connect with some leadership there. So I'll leave that there. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Houston.
My colleague from Stony Plain, thank you for the question in regards to the transit park and ride. And it's always been a belief from Spruce Grove's perspective that the park and ride would be a hub for Express Direct. And we would have our local commuter service integrated into that to do the shuttling around, and it would also provide a more Express Direct from Stony Plain. So that's always been our goal. So I think it's a good question that you had, and we're excited about the opportunity to turn that into a Delta hub, we call it. And the big jets come in and they just load up from the collector service. And I think that's going to create a lot of efficiencies for us. So that's been on our radar for the last number of years, but looking forward to the implementation of that new service. Thank you.
Is that the name of the transit center, the Delta Hub? Perfect. All right. See no more questions then. Ms. Shea Smith, you're up.
So-
We're going to take a break right after this, I find.
So while Ms. Shea Smith is getting ready, I'll just go through some of the additional slides that we have to just run through some of the things that we learned from the comparative analysis so that we can put to bed the additional, the 2020 numbers. The original business case conceptual service elements provided 2.5 times more service than what is being delivered today. When you take that into account with the effects that we're still experiencing from COVID, and you're seeing that the issues that transit systems are currently running through, trying to attract riders back, when we looked at what was being provided on the road today, plus the additions, we're now advocating or recommending in this service plan a 40% as opposed to a 250% increase in services. And those are mostly recommended by the municipal members, and that includes additional weekend, midday, and evening services, or the little tie-ins that take us to Government Center here downtown, or add some of the aspirational points from our municipal members. When we looked at our, we again want to say thank you to all of the consultation that we had with not only the municipal technical representatives, but the CAOs and yourselves as board members and the municipal councils that we engaged with and had discussions on. Those were valuable in more ways than you can count, and we do appreciate that. And discussions with some of our municipal members brought us to the conclusion that some things had to change. For example, that was one of the big reasons why we moved from, in the Beaumont case, the routing from Beaumont to Heritage Valley, and we moved it to Beaumont to Mill Woods. That absolutely came from our discussions with municipal members, the technical staffs, as well as the expertise that WSP and Souls Company brought to our conversations. As you've seen in the earlier documentation, what has been brought to the table by WSP Canada Incorporated is the analysis and regional services that have been adjusted into a regional network. In some cases, the midday, evening, and weekend services have been adjusted, and we have changed some of the transit hub locations, or regional routes have been revised to increase regional interoperability and to offer seamless services for our riders. Key changes from the original business case that are part of this are the additional services from Edmonton. As we've heard, Edmonton City Council expressed a desire that the EMTSC services not negatively affect existing services. So what we've looked at and what has been provided are new additional services proposed to provide quicker travel times along existing corridors that are the precursors to the BRT system. So we have additional weekend and evening or weekend services on those routes as well. And we're offsetting some of the services that are already on those routes to provide additional levels of frequency. On the approval of the recommended opening day service plan, we'll refine the proposed service delivery elements with the service providers and confirm cost elements for the 2023 budget, which will be discussed, or the lead up of which will be discussed in the next little while. We'll begin negotiations for asset transfers where applicable. We'll begin negotiations with municipalities regarding service transition, beginning our detailed planning and negotiations for the transition of appropriate municipal staffs where appropriate or where applicable to the EMTSC. We'll continue discussions regarding the involvement with the Smart Card or the ARC program, and we'll develop detailed costings, plans, and timelines for the opening day service launch. The local transition for conventional and on-demand transit, we are not seeing any changes to the currently proposed local services that the member municipalities are presently providing. The responsibility for local services, with the exception of Edmonton, will transfer to the commission, which will continue to refine local services with our member municipality input to reflect local municipal decisions. On the question of paratransit. Paratransit services are currently provided in some member municipalities to those with reduced mobility to provide everyone the freedom and independence to travel on transit safely. As identified in the 2020 business case, paratransit services less the city of Edmonton were planned to be delivered under the EMTSC in the longer term. The investigation into the required information and costs associated with transitioning these services to the EMTSC is now underway. As with local services, changes to those services are not being proposed as part of any of the transition activities, and continued work with municipal member councils and administrations regarding the paratransit services are proposed to be part of the ongoing service planning and budget development process. With regard to fares, it is in the intent that we will inherit the current fare levels and individual municipalities have set, and that regional fare agreements will be maintained for the foreseeable future. On opening day, the EMTSC will continue moving on to that with a long-term goal or a medium-term goal for the commission to work towards the harmonization of the regional fare structure. For some of our member municipalities, in particular Devon, we will have to develop a fare strategy for them as part of the opening day service. But that is something that we can easily achieve. And now I will turn over to Ms. Lori Shea Smith, who will start talking about some of the regional costs.
And thanks, Jim. Because the presentation today really focuses on opening day service, specifically our regional service, we wanted to present the cost, the estimated cost of that regional service today, fully knowing that we do have to come back to the board with our fully flushed out and developed 2023 operating budget. But we did want to present this today. Councillor Harris kind of stole my thunder and talked about this slide before we got here, but now we'll go into the details. So what you see on your screen is a summary of the regional network that Erin from WSP reviewed and went route by route during her presentation. Essentially, there are 11 routes. And after the WSP project team have completed the optimization of the regional network, there's an estimated 163,000 annual service hours. We have estimated the direct operating costs of the regional network to be approximately 19 million. While WSP was working on the bottom-up costing for us, we came to understand that municipal financial reporting varies quite a bit due to the differences in the transit systems across our municipalities. For the comparative evaluation, we therefore focused on a set of common costs, or what we refer to as direct operating costs, that include contract hourly rates, fuel, and fleet maintenance costs. With these costs, we have calculated a route by route hourly rate to calculate the estimated cost seen above. We have been conservative with our estimates for the annual service hours and the total 2023 service costs. Both the annual service hours and the estimated costs are currently being refined as we work through the bottom-up building of the 2023 operating budget process. As you see depicted on the map or on the maps in the previous slides, the regional network crosses municipal boundaries and has shared benefits for commission members. To create the regional route sharing allocations for opening day, we've used a set of principles, and the percentages you see in the tables are associated with those principles. We've also included one non-commissioned member in this table. It's specifically Leduc County, as there is a cost sharing agreement in place for the Metro South Airport route. The allocation percentages shown above, or in the table, sorry, are subject to board approval. So we will be bringing this back to the board for approval during our 2023 budget process. So not only is there going to be a refinement in the service hours and in the estimated costs that I have here, because I do have a contingency built in here to be conservative, but there is the potential that based on the board's discussion, the allocation percentages could change. Once we start operating service in 2023, we'll start receiving ridership data generated from ARC. And these percentages could be adjusted based on that more refined data and the board's direction as part of the 2024 operating budget. So on the next slide, I just wanted to talk now about our 2023 operating budget. So the approval of the opening day service plan will lead to the creation of a comprehensive 2023 operating budget and our 2024-2025 outlook. For the commission, there are 4 categories of costs that will be included in the budget. We've talked a lot today about our regional service. As Jim said, local service from the municipalities that offer local service will also be moving into the commission for opening day. So there'll be a bucket of cost for that as well. In addition, as I've called them pool costs, but they are commission administrative costs. So there's some of those. And then we also have the debt repayment for our startup costs. And so there's really 4 categories that we'll be bringing forward. These costs will be funded through a combination of fare and non-fare revenues, and the remaining funding shortfall will be included in the annual requisitions to our commission members. So our governance bylaw outlines how our annual funding shortfall is to be recovered. Essentially, we have 2 categories of allocations. I'll start with the second one first because it does tie into what we've been discussing so far. So those are service-based cost allocations. So in that table I showed with the percentages and the 11 routes, that's one. So that's for the regional service, so that it will be allocated. And the local service, of course, will be allocated 100% to the specific municipality. So, you know, those service-based cost allocations will be determined by the type and degree of services, and they will, as I said, allocated to each member. The second piece is the base fee. So the base fee is a combination of a fixed dollar amount and a variable per capita component. Now, we will be bringing forward a recommendation as part of our 2023 budget, and it will be up to the board to determine what those 2 components will be. There are a variety of options for those 2 components, and so that will be part of our 2023 budget as well. When we're looking and thinking about allocations, any recommendations that we will be presenting to the board will be based on a set of principles. And so the principles are cost equity, clarity, administrative feasibility, effectiveness, and durability. I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. I just have 2 more slides. So with respect to the service-based cost allocations, there are 2 categories of commission costs for 2023 that'll be included in here, as I said. There'll be the regional direct costs that we reviewed in the table in slide 47, and then the local service costs. And then we will also have estimates for fare and non-fare revenue. And in addition to that, there are some existing costs within your municipalities that will also be allocated to regional and local service. Those include customer service. There are things like operations management, so existing staff in your municipalities. There are transit stop maintenance and facility costs, and all of that is going to be allocated to the municipalities in the regional and local buckets. Next, in the base fee, we have 2 categories again of commission costs. So one are the pool costs, and that are the operating costs of now operating a single administrative structure for one transit agency versus 7 individual agency. As we worked through the project with the WSP team and worked with the municipal administrations, we did quite a bit of discussion around those administrative costs, because while they may appear incremental, they do exist in some form within the member municipalities. They're very difficult to quantify because they're not housed directly in the transit budgets. And so they're housed in what I would refer to as corporate budgets, such as finance, HR, communications, and so IT, and so on and so forth. So, but this certainly is a pool of costs for one administration versus 7 administrations. The debt repayment includes the repayment of our startup debt. And so it's been incurred from the period of 2020, from the back half of 2020 until the end of 2022. In the board approved debt management policy, it does stipulate that this startup debt, which is in the form of an operating line of credit, is to be repaid in 4 years. So the calculations that I will be using in forming the budget will be based on that stipulation. And what I didn't mention before, the regional and local costs represent about 80%, a little bit more, 80% of our total costs. And then the debt repayment and the pool costs are about 20%. So we will be looking forward to bringing lots more details to the board as we work through the budget, and we will be building it from the bottom up. Next steps for us, I just want to signal next steps would be, we've received all the budgets from the member municipalities. Thanks again for answering all of our questions, and we will be looking forward to working with the administration, specifically the finance team and the transit operations teams, to refine those assumptions as we try to build the budget for 2023. We're available for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shea Smith. I know there's lots of questions. I'm going to use the mic and start off. Thanks for the presentation for sure. And I do see your hand, Councillor Harris, and I know there's others around the table. I got a question. In terms of the pooled costs, you said that pooled costs is a combination of shared costs and debt repayment. And we got a debt repayment schedule of $7 million over 4 years. It's significant. And the repayment schedule is self-imposed.
Yes.
And so the question is that if we were to say 8 years, what would the pooled cost be? I mean, what percentage of that 20% is current debt repayment? So if it's 20%, how much of that 20% is debt repayment?
I have to just do some quick math, but I think it's about, now I'm doing the math in my head. I know the numbers, but I don't know the percentage. It will be about 30% of it. That's about the percentage.
Okay.
And you're right, because that's the reason why I brought up the debt management policy. It is in the board's purview to modify the, to ask us to bring forward a change to that policy.
Fair enough. And I suspect there's rationale for paying off the debt quickly. And I knew that, I know Mr. Jankowski has a perspective on this. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. You anticipated my comment. I think there is going to be an interesting discussion that we're going to have with the board with regards to this term of debt repayment. How long do we wish to take to repay that original stand-up debt? What we haven't yet had a discussion about, and we will be initiating this with the board as well, is a discussion around capital. And certainly as we get into the formulation of an asset management plan, as well as a future capital investment strategy, as we talk about asset management, we're going to have to get into the discussion about funding of asset management reserves. And so I've kind of been cautious about suggesting an extension of the the overall length of time for repayment of that original startup debt, knowing full well that this organization is also going to have to start putting money in the bank to actually start funding asset management reserves sooner rather than later. And so a shorter debt repayment period will allow us to essentially take the money that perhaps the board had been inputting into an annual operating budget, and once the debt is retired, taking and allocating that money to building up the necessary asset management reserves. So it will be a good discussion, I'm sure, with the board. There are some decisions that the board will be able to make in order to balance. Do we look at decreasing our operating budget at the front end and risk increasing that budget over the coming years in order to deal with those burdens that will be coming along later? Or do we look at flatlining right from the start, or flattening as much and eliminating big peaks in the future? So it will be a good discussion coming forward.
Fair enough. Thank you. If it's on the table for discussion, that's good enough for me. Councillor Harris, and then whoever else. No, you're okay. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, as the chair of the Audit and Finance Committee, that was one of the questions that I had myself as well in regards to that financing. One of the reasons why it stands out particular is because the 4-year term that was originally determined was based on the business case that was presented, and it was based on the savings that were anticipated in that business case and the amount of time they'd be realized. Maybe an error in our ways in putting that as a self-imposed policy at that time, but I definitely think it is something to look at. I'd like to see the options. That's certainly one thing that whether that comes straight to the board, whether that comes to audit and finance first, I'm open to either. I think it's also pertinent to recognize too that up to this point in time, without being an operational entity, we have not been able to access much in the way of grant funds other than the stand-up grants that we originally received. And so knowing that, I'd like to hope that we will have many more options once we actually become operational as a service provider that are afforded to us. I did want to ask the question though, and I don't know if it's an answer that'll be able to be provided today, but as we've talked about, the original security of the $7 million was provided by the City of Edmonton and the City of St. Albert. Once we become operational and we do the transfer of assets, will that security be transferred to the commission, or will that security remain the responsibility of the City of Edmonton and the City of St. Albert until such a time as that debt is repaid?
Had those discussions with the bank. It's certainly going to be part of what we do this fall. We've had discussions with municipal affairs about our debt limit, and there's still some work to be done there as well to confirm that and the timing of when that changes in 2023. Obviously, it has to be linked to our operational plan, and so we're still refining our opening day date and our business case really for 2023. So those two things will be part of the work this fall to confirm that as we're looking to changing from a startup into a full operation in spring or summer of 2023.
Thank you. And the final point that I'll raise on that, and I appreciate all of the hard work that's going into it and all the hard work that's gone into this, is I know one of the struggles that occurs is as we're talking about going operational in spring, summer of 2023, municipal budgets are coming forth before councils in October of 2022 for the operating year of 2023. And it is, I've had it expressed that it's becoming increasingly difficult from the municipal standpoint and the member standpoint in trying to anticipate what needs to go into the corporate plans. So I'd like to express my desire to see higher levels of communication. I believe there was a request of a joint meeting with the CAOs versus the one-on-one meeting with the CAOs. I do think that it's pertinent that as much information as possible be shared as quickly as possible with the CAOs of all the member municipalities in order to facilitate appropriate planning going into municipal budgets, even though understanding that our budget will not be set until after such a time as those processes are complete in most member municipalities.
So in the earlier chart, you did see that I did provide a range. So it's 31 to 35 million. And so I do have that range of the 4 categories. which all needs to be refined, but what we're working on now is reconciling that. Do have the 2022 and in some instances of 2023 budgets from all of your members now. And so what I'm doing is using my range and comparing it and reconciling it to the individual budgets so we can at least present everybody with an order of magnitude so that they can factor that into the planning. So Paul and I have had a couple of meetings so far. Paul's at least had one on his own and one with me, and we do have more next week. And so I am working on full reconciliations for everybody.
Excellent. I significantly appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Add a level of caution though, until the board actually approves the budget and approves some of these tough decisions that we're talking about, we will only be presenting. And we fully recognize the challenges at the municipal level and the desire to have this information. Quite frankly, a lot of what we're going to be presenting to the board is dependent on the decisions around the opening day service plan. And we all know some of the challenges that we've had in terms of getting here and getting to the point where we've got a final plan presented. We also know that we've got a similar process that we're going through with one of our biggest shareholders, that being the city of Edmonton. So a lot of the decision making that is yet to be undertaken by the board is, you know, we're awaiting certain things to take place, but we recognize that there is pressure at the municipalities, and we absolutely want to sit down and provide a little bit of a range discussion for all the municipal CAOs and the municipal finance commissioners. We are going to put big qualifiers on it, because until this board is able to make those decisions, we can't provide an ironclad number. So we're a little bit betwixt and between right now.
It's part of the difficulty of the task that we've set ourselves to stand up a commission from nothing. There's a Latin term for creating something from nothing, but it escapes me right now, but it's very difficult at the best of times. Councillor Stewart.
Just reflecting on the comment regarding the debt repayment over the period of time and the amount of dollars that we're going to be putting into making that debt repayment. And then it would seem that we're going to be getting into an asset management, which means putting money into reserves. So I think the CAOs and all of us need a better understanding about what that's going to mean. Does that mean we're going to start putting $1.5 to $2 million a year, you know, and keeping that payment up? And so I think we need some, you know, further information about that plan, because that's kind of new. Recognizing that we all have asset managements in our communities, but we need to get a better understanding about what that's going to mean and how the impact is going to be on those budgets. Thank you.
Fair enough. Councillor Knack, any questions?
Thank
Okay.
you.
You've personally have done yeoman's work on behalf of the commission of late. I want to thank you for that. It's not been easy for any of us, quite honestly, and I want to thank the board and administration for the yeoman's work. And if we don't have, do you have anything further, Ms. Shea Smith, Mr. McDonald? All right. Yeah, fair enough. Go ahead, Councillor Stone.
Yes, I think the commission is at a point, you know, where some important questions and Councillor Knack is listening, of course, in regards to the Edmonton Metropolitan Transit Service Commission Phase 1 service plan implications, and that's going to be going to City of Edmonton. And I would say the report itself to City Council is somewhat neutral based on the administrative recommendations, neutral to almost to a little slight of, I wouldn't say negative, but I would say it's in the middle. So I'm wondering out loud and quite emphatically would like to know from this commission, the Phase 2 implementation, if that is, I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, are we going to be, do we have any certainty about going into a Phase 2 implementation? Because we're doing a lot of work to get to that point. Because the phase one implementation is only around a $19 million budget, which isn't significant, but the phase two implementation would be key to the actual reason that this commission exists. So to our CAO and to the city of Edmonton, is there a possibility that phase two implementation would happen? And if it doesn't happen, is there any reason to even have this small amount of service for this board?
Well, let me take a crack at that. One of the reasons why, right from the get-go, that was a big question for the commission. Original structure, original plan, and the thought is that it's interesting, but originally there was some concern around from the region around doing a full upload because it was just a bridge too far for the region to consider anything other than sort of Edmonton taking over. And now it's sort of changed around insofar as that if a full upload is viewed in Edmonton as perhaps a loss of control of their own transit. Now, in either case, I don't think either position is founded in reality. The premise of the commission is 8 municipalities working together for the betterment of all regions. And the idea that any one particular municipality, in particular our largest shareholder, would somehow lose control of their own service, that was never intended, and certainly not in the view of any kind of future of the commission. But to answer the question now, I would suggest to you that the original wisdom of doing a two-phased approach still stands. We need to prove to the world, if you will, that we can actually operate, and that there is that there's merit, and that there's benefit to every municipality, including the city of Edmonton. And I would quite honestly present that I believe the city of Edmonton is the largest winner in all of this. That does not mean that our municipalities don't win as well. It's a winner for the region, and we've heard it said by Edmonton Global, by the Edmonton Metro Region Board, and by the members of our municipalities, what regionally connected public transit services mean. And if we keep that in mind and keep that goal in mind, I think we'll get to where we need to go eventually. But you raise a great question, Councillor Houston. I don't know that we have an answer for you today, but I think we start operating, people start to take a breath and realize that nobody is out to get anybody else, and we'll start to see the benefits accrue to the region, every member in the region.
Thank you for that, because I needed to ask that question. The other one is, and we're hoping to get some more financial answers, that the initial report that was given was that there would be a cost saving to member municipalities. And I think we recognize and realize that, things have changed since the original business case. But we're looking forward to getting some more open dialogue with our finance people and our administrations to get a better handle on, what we're anticipating for the costs associated for municipal budgets this fall as well. So, and I know there's lots of unknowns and stuff for that, but we're looking forward to, getting further dialogue with an open and transparent flow of information. Thank you.
Fair enough. Seeing no more questions, so we actually have a significant agenda before us, and we've been at it almost 2 hours now. 2 hours and 10 minutes. So, Councillor Knack, let's give ourselves till about 25 after 3. Yeah, sorry. Oh, right. Okay. There is a motion that's required here to accept. Go ahead, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move that the board accept as information the materials and discussion as presented as part of the opening day service plan recommendations and direct staff to incorporate input received and finalize the plan for approval at the September 15th meeting of the board.
Fair enough. Accept that motion. Any opening comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again expressing my sincere appreciation to the board, our staff, all of the parties that have been involved, including all the municipal administrations in bringing us to this point. Obviously, it has been quite the process as we've seen the chart from back. I think there's 5 members around this board table that started on the original RTSC board and have seen it through to here in almost 4 years of time. It's a very exciting time. It's also a very apprehensive time.
Yeah.
It is a big step. It's a brave step. And when you look at what this will mean for the region, when you look at the presentations we had from EMRB and Edmonton Global this morning or earlier this afternoon, it's a step that needs to be taken. And it's a step that will improve our entire region by leaps and bounds. And again, another step that will help us up on the world stage and being a first-class region across the board. So I'm very excited about this. I look forward to our meeting on the 15th. I look forward to hearing all of my colleagues' comments and hopefully seeing service start, what was it, spring or summer, early 2023. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Any other comments on the motion? Councillor Knack?
I'll save it for the 15th.
Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Monkhoff-Swain?
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to acknowledge your answer before to a very fair question from Councillor Houston, but I thought it was absolutely on the nose. So well done. Yeah, couldn't have even tried to say it better myself. So thank you for saying that. And like a few other things that have been said today, I'm going to go back, record it, write it down, and repeat it in my own words. So thank you very much for that, because I know other people are asking. So well said.
Thank you. Anything to close, Councillor Laurie? Call for the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. 20, well, let's go till 3:30. Okay, so 15-minute break, a bit of an extended break for everybody. Grab some coffee, and thanks for those who are still here for the next portion. Pray your indulgence for another 15 minutes. Thank you. YouTube. All right. Thank you, everybody, for, I trust everybody got some refreshments. We're going for the second half now of our board meeting, and we'll just wait until Councillor Knack comes with us, and the next portion of our meeting is in camera. So at the appropriate time here, I'll ask for someone to move the motion that's on the screen. I think Andrew will be here shortly, so. All right, thank you. We're now into the second half of the Edmonton Metropolitan Transit Services Commission board meeting. The next portion of our meeting is in camera. If I could get someone to make the motion. Thank you, Councillor Houston.
Chair, I'll move that the board move in camera in accordance with the provisions of Division 2, exceptions to disclosure of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection and Privacy Act, FOIP, RSA 2000 CF 25 as per section 16 through 28.
Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. And that is carried unanimously. We'll now move in camera, and we'll wait until All right, welcome back to those who are online. Just a brief recap of what we covered off in camera. Without detail, we talked about service charges for non-member municipalities and input into federal survey regarding permanent public transit funding. And as a consequence of that, we actually do have a motion that we'd like to make publicly. Would somebody care to move this motion, as we'll see it on the
We've got two motions, actually. The first is the acceptance of the
Oh,
letters in camera.
accept the, for it as information. All right, getting ahead of myself here. Who would like to make this motion? Thank you, Counselor Harris. I appreciate your raising your hand on that one.
Come out of camera.
Well, we've come out of camera. So now we need to, yeah, oh. We need to accept as information. Okay, do you want to do it?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Councillor Montcalm Swain.
Yeah, I'll move that the board accept as information the materials and discussion as presented in camera.
Thank you very much, Councillor Montcalm Swain. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Sorry, Gordon.
That's okay. I didn't like glasses
You
on.
kind of look like you had both hands up there. Okay, now we do have a motion here.
Let's go back in camera. It was so much fun.
Nope.
You need a boar's whisker or.
Counselor Justin, Counselor Laurie, you read it in. Is that okay?
You get all the good stuff.
All right, Councillor Laurie, if you read that motion into the record.
Well, you gave me a long
Lots
Sure.
of press.
I'll move that the board direct staff to respond to the Infrastructure Canada Public Transit Fund survey, highlighting the 2 points below, and that staff be directed to prepare a letter for the board directors' signatures to the Federal Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities, highlighting our submission with copies to all member municipalities to ensure that regional transit entities not owned by a single municipality are eligible for this and future federal funding programs, and to ensure that operating costs as well as the traditional focus on capital investments be included in this and future federal funding programs to reduce the sole reliance on municipal budgets for transit services which benefit all constituents.
Thank you very much. Certainly accept that motion. Any opening comments?
Mr. Chair, I think it's obvious that, there's a shift that's been happening in transit throughout, and there are many commissions being formed that are not single municipalities. And also it's evident that operating tends to be one of the more challenging aspects that we deal with when it comes to transit. And so to have that available as one of the inclusions in any federal grants, I think is pertinent. And I'm happy that this has been brought forward by our administration, and I am pleased with their plans to respond.
Thank you very much. Any other comments by board members? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much for that, and thanks for putting that together, Mr. Jankowski. Before we get the final motion of the day, is there anything that we need to? Okay, nothing from administration, anything from the board? All right, well, thank you. I want to thank everybody. Today was a long meeting. It was an intense meeting. Covered some very important topics related to all of our municipalities. And so for the work that you guys put in, guys, meaning don't mean to be gender specific, for all who put in the hard work on this. Thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned.